You got any questions? Anybody?
Actually, yeah, I've got one question. Rumours have risen that English companies will move down south if we were to go independent, leaving thousands of people out of work because, for example, they're saying things like companies can't pay the taxes that we'll be imposing on them.
Well, there's a couple of answers to that. First of all, why would they do that? They've obviously got skills up here, or they wouldn't place their factories and their organisations up here. Standard Life's a great example. The Standard Life was part of the invention process of the insurance company, so why would they move away with all that? I mean, as a shareholder of Standard Life, I'd have something to say about that, you know what I mean? That's one aspect. The taxes, that's a ridiculous one because Alex Salmond, who's not guaranteed to get in at the election come independence by any stretch of the imagination, is talking about cutting taxes to business to attract more companies here. So I'm sure some will move for specific reasons, but very, very few. I don't see any reason why that should be any more than somebody deciding they want to move to France because it's more sunny or something like that. Bit flippant there, but I'm sorry about that.
It's right that a nation can use any currency it wants legally. It's whether it's a formal arrangement or not between governments.
Many countries in the world that use the US dollar, and I don't know if they've all got formal, or I know for a fact some of them don't. I mean, my own company, for instance, I'm not going to talk about the company, we use exclusively euros, and as I've told you before, most of my customers, almost all of them are English. They have no problem using the euro. I didn't have to ask anybody's permission to do that. It's just most of my suppliers in Italy, and they use the euro. We could do that again if we so choose, but it would be nicer if we got together and stopped trying to bully each other into stupid decisions about this. Now, on his other wider point about setting up a country, we've got all these liabilities as a nation as we stand at the moment, the United Kingdom. I'd certainly be for us taking our population share, 8.2% of the liabilities, but I'd bloody well want 8.2% of the assets as well. I'm talking about things like the currency, things like the money that's sitting in the Bank of England. We're entitled to that, aren't we? We're entitled to the assets of the nation that we helped build for 300 years, and we paid our way. I can show you lots of slides. We're not a kept nation, never have been. Any figures we've seen, we've overpaid all the time.
People depend on the state, sponge and things like that. If Scotland as a nation was a sponging nation, you couldn't get shot of you quick enough. That's not logical, really.
We're portrayed as being spongers and, what was it that idiot for the Sun calls it? I can't remember what her name is. Subsidy junkies is a great one. It's interesting, it's a UKIP guy who invented the word. He's now a Euro MP for us. Interesting that. How did he manage that, you know? Bit of publicity from the BBC helped, no doubt. But we've never been subsidy junkies. If we had really been a subsidy junkie, why wouldn't they be encouraging us to go? We've got something they want. I mean, there's another thing on the pound. If they stopped us using the pound, their balance of trade's going to go west. 40 billion a year in balance of trade is the whisky industry and the oil industry alone. If that's not going through England, the City of London is getting traded in pounds, there's going to be a big balance of trade difference. The City of London will have a word with Georgie boy, and we'll come to an agreement. Absolutely, 100%. There's one thing on that. If you look at Scandinavia as a model, Finland uses the euro, right? Now you've got to look at them as a group of countries because they are, like a wider sense, a wee mini Europe. They are thing. Finland has the euro. Denmark doesn't have the euro, but they're have been to Germany forever. So they've got a currency that moves up and down with the euro. So it's not independent, but it's sort of the euro. Norway and Sweden don't have the euro. They've got their own currency, and Norway isn't even in the European Union. So there you have 4 countries, and you know what? They get on just fine. So I don't believe it for a minute, but if we didn't end up with the pound, it wouldn't matter a toss. I'd pay groats to have my pint of a Friday night, and it wouldn't bother me.
So moving on back to your question about setting up a nation, how much would it cost to actually set up a government in Scotland and to change all the documents that we have from the British passport to driver's licences with the DVLA and things like that?
Well, the thing is, we already have such a huge part of the infrastructure already there, whether it's tax codes, it's not entirely there. And also, we're not dumb up here. I mean, Christ almighty, we can actually look down south and say, right, we can maybe do that, but hold on, can we maybe not do it a wee bit better? I can only go on figures that have been placed by a lot cleverer economists than me, like the gentleman, I've forgotten his name now, who did the report from the London School of Economics, and he's talking about 200 million. I don't think it will even cost us that. And if you look at the kind of things we get for 200 million now, you know, the upkeep of the nuclear fleet, that costs twice as much as that kind of thing. There is no problem at all in my mind that we could set up for a couple of 100 million. And you've got to remember, a couple of 100 million, I'd like that in my back pocket, but in a nation, even a smallish one like Scotland, that's nothing. You know, that really is not an awful lot of money. It's £40 per head of population.
And would...
It's a night at the movies for a family. That's how much it is.
Would the funding that we get to set up our country, would that help to set up consulates all over the world, or will we still be entitled to use the British consulate?
Well, if you look at some of the bigger countries in the world, like America, the British Foreign Service has hundreds of buildings in America. I think we'd be entitled to 10% of them or something like that. I think in New York they've got 16 buildings or something like that. You know, it's something weird of that nature. So if we're entitled to the liabilities, which I quite want to pay my way in world, you know, we're not sponging countries, no matter what the sun thinks down south, not the sun up here, the sun down south, then we'll take the liabilities but give us some of the assets. I know they've got multiple buildings in Moscow, for instance, you know. We've got multiple buildings in China. You know, all these countries, you know, the British government went to try and tell us not to become independent, interestingly. So I wonder how that's going to go. But the foreign service is rich in buildings. Consulates, we've got plenty of clever people that can go and do it. There's plenty of Scots people in the foreign service that would love the job of actually going and working in our embassies in all these countries. So it's not a problem. Same for the armed forces. The assets are there, we're entitled to some of them, and the people are there.
Right, and finally, from myself, what will happen to the current pensions system that's on it, that we have at the moment?
Well, if you're talking about state pensions, which I think you are, well, they're guaranteed under. It's the same as if you're a person that currently lives in England, right? Scotland becomes independent. No, this is a bad analogy, I'll go right back. The main thing is you're entitled to your pension because you've paid into it. Now that'll change through time. I don't think your pension's going to go up in value, but that'll be replaced by the Scottish pension. And this is the Westminster Civil Service have said that. It's the same as us 5 million people, or however many people are pensioned, and I'll be a pensioner in a couple of years, leave, are actually entitled to a pension that they've paid into, whether they live in Scotland or they live in Marbella. And that's how they do it. Australia, America, full of pensions. So it's the same as us leaving. We've paid into it, we're entitled to it. And the government has said that, even the British government. So it's not a problem.
Since the new Scottish government would begin setting up its own pension pot, so there'd be like a date where everyone who was born after a certain date would...
And your pension won't go up from the British government. Again, this is a liability asset kind of thing. But during the negotiation, there'll be who actually gives you the cheque, or who puts the money in your account, or the post office, or whatever. You know, what path it takes. But you've paid into this for many, many years, so there will be, the assets are already there. The thing on pensions is important. People are. My dad says to me, he says, I'm voting no because that Alex Salmon's going to take away my disability. He's had quadruple bypass and veins removed from his leg, he needs his disability. I'm saying, who the hell told you that? And he can't even remember, somebody in a pub, no doubt, you know. But these things are never going to happen. because they can't happen, because I personally think our benefit system as it stands, including pensions and disability, are shockingly bad. I think there was a government guy about a year ago said, of all the Western nations in the world, the only one that pays less pension is Mexico. We don't have a pension in this country that any other country in Europe, especially Western Europe, would be proud of. I'd like to think a government that I'd elect in Scotland would do a wee bit better than we currently do. So sure, what you get for the British pension is protected, but let's look to try and do a bit better. It's part of being a better country. I'm a businessman, I want to run business. The reason I want to do is so I can employ more Scottish people, so they can pay in and get a good pension at the end of the day. It's quite simple. We're all Scots together. It doesn't matter what we do. And I certainly don't want my kids by the time they retire, or you or your kids, to actually have a pension that's a pittance that my dad currently gets for the British state.
So, with the government as well though, what help is going to be given to get more Scottish people into jobs in Scotland?
Well, I look at the opportunities that we've had over the years. When I left school, I was telling the other group there, I could have went to Burnt Island Shipyard, Alcan, I could have went to the dockyard. I didn't choose to go to the mine like my cousins did. They wanted to be miners. All these jobs are gone now, you know. And I remember, I'm old enough to remember 79, they said, oh, if you vote for a Scottish Parliament, what's going to happen to Linwood, what's going to happen to Ravenscraig, your coal mines, they'll all be gone. Well, we sort of never got that Parliament, it sort of worked out. And a friend of mine pulled me up the Express ad saying that, and now they're saying the same rubbish again. Only this time, how many jobs are left at Rosyth? I chose to go to the Navy. I left the Navy 10 years later. Burnt Island Shipyard is gone. There was no jobs at Rosyth. Half of them had gone. The other half has gone since. So I got into electronics. The British government at that time was trying to attract industry, the new growth industry, like electronics. And I went to a college. I didn't have to pay to go to the college and learn about electronics. And then I went and worked in an electronics firm in Donnybristle, you know. And then 10 years later, it got a bit bad for me, so I went to university. And I didn't have to pay to go to university either. This is the advantages that I had. I'd like to see my kids have. It's as simple as that. And I think most people in Scotland want that, whether they be well-off businessman or you know, I'm sure Mr. Colin Fox would agree with me on this, from a total other end of the spectrum. So hopefully that answers your question.
Do you see then that if Scotland votes for yes independent, that will be encouraged to set up other businesses? Because I remember Fife having a sugar factory, Eastwood's chicken factory, all these smaller factories have gone now too, because it's people working that pays for pensions. So
another lady who had a hairdressing job, she doesn't have enough customers that can afford to
get new businesses coming up here, because they're totally concentrating on London.
I can only talk for myself. But the thing is, it's difficult to start a business in the United Kingdom just now, because I know, and Colin would agree with that, he wants good, well-paying job for our young people.
Yes, and become independent. Will it be a better chance?
Absolutely, there is absolutely no reason why a Scottish government that's close to the people wouldn't invest in its people and have legislation that encourages business, because we know it can't all be about good dole. It's good. Sure, we want good benefits, but we want good opportunities for our people. And one thing we should do is stop this nonsense of squeezing the education system. To me, I'd put my own money in to get a better education system for kids, you know, because I think it's atrocious at the moment and getting worse.
Where would the Scottish Government stand on migrant workers coming across and working?
I can't speak for the new Scottish Government, but I know as an inclusive society, we would obviously have a policy on immigration, there's no doubt about it. But we need people to come. We need people here. And I look at the people, the Poles and that have come here, and the first Poles I knew that come here came to save our asses during the Second World War. So And these guys, a lot of them have started business and they're all employing Scots. And I think that's an inclusive way of looking at a new Scotland.